Okie dokie, guys. I am back to play with beads today. So this is what's left of the veneer we had. And I've got some white rolled into a semi-log. We'll get that a little bit better rolled in a minute. Let's kind of go over supplies I use and how I make these. And I guess it's not a bad idea to have a few examples, and I don't have... Oh, I put them all away. That's right. Okay. So yeah, this has been my bead making craziness lately. There they are. Okay, so this is the batch that I did before, and they have now been resined, so they're extra gorgeous. So I will show you how I make these. Yeah, so that's the set in the blue, and then this set's really cool too. And this is what happened when I took these guys, all my little scraps, especially the mostly white scraps, and put them over purple rather than working on translucent. And yeah, so that gave me a color change with the little bits of that tealy blues coming through. So that's another option we can do, is pick a background color for using the scraps. But pretty much just run through and show you guys how I do these. I do try to keep them organized to some degree because I use them for leads for my show leads, and I don't think I have... Yeah, I don't have an example in here. Sometimes I do, but I don't have one in here right now. But anyway, so yeah, so beads. That's the mission for today. Else back away. All right, so what I use is usually start with a center core, wrap it with the whatever veneer I've been playing with, and I'm using these to help structure, stabilize, and keep my shape. So I'm sitting here, just a little scrappy thing, but they just help to hold the shape together, and you'll see how that works in a minute. What else? Knitting needles, and I am not positive how big they are. I'm sure this one's around 4 millimeters, maybe a hair, maybe 3.5. These are 4 millimeter interior diameter, I believe. I know I need at least 4 millimeter for doing getting the paracord and a double width through it. So that's what I aim for, is at least 4 millimeter holes. So pretty sure that's what these set me up for. And then originally I would roll them on my glass tiles. However, I finally got crafty and put the 3D printer to work and made myself some little bead troughs so that I can make a couple different sizes and whatnot. I am working out the design on these, but I will probably start offering them on Etsy, especially if you guys tell me you're interested in them. They're a long-term print, so if I get any drama with the printer, then they don't come out 100% perfect. So that's kind of the tricky part, is figuring out when I go sell things what I can print reliably enough to actually put on a website, because the printers get quirky. But yeah, so I can play around with them and get a couple different depths to my... So basically the metal bead sits here and rolls across. Actually, the metal bead comes inside, but the whole of it, I put a post... Here we go, give you a quick idea. Let's secure one of these guys. So essentially, that's not the one I used for this one. Let's go with an extra deep one just because. All right. So essentially, it would sit there, and this was a slightly less depth, and roll them like this. So that allows me to use the stick and the little bead rollers. And sometimes they try to give me a little push and a little separation and get annoying, but most of the time they work out really well. So you'll probably end up seeing that happen. So I like having a very fine knitting needle in order to skewer my beads to begin with. I'll show you what I do with that. And then I like having something that's roughly the size of these things, but I don't want it to be a tight fit. I want it to be a loose fit because I want these to roll freely. So anyway, let's see if we can't get down to the job. Let's swap things around so I can get to what I'm working on, keep you guys in frame. All right, so I'll start here. Now I usually use either PVC, or sorry, not PVC, plexiglass. I have a couple of these guys that came in a set I found on Amazon or somewhere, but they're just little stampers. They do have a texture on this side. They're slightly etched. So if I'm using these, I make sure I use that side and roll out my center core, or I'll grab this. And then this is going to be, actually, let me just do the full width of my veneer. And that should be about, might still be a little bit more than I need. So I'll go ahead and slice, touch off the end of that. Because I want this to be thin enough that I can wrap it with my veneer and still not be obnoxiously thick. Because essentially, when I go to roll, there we go. Actually, that's about the right width, so anything overhanging this is probably a little much. Alrighty. Should be about right. Put that away. Slice. So these stinking Cernit veneers are a pain. Oh, and then the other thing was, because these came out so much darker than the tealier version I was hoping for, I am going to be using a white core, because I think the white core will just brighten them up a little bit. So this one was done on a white core, and you can see how you see through the translucent to the little bit of brightening effect of the white. And this was done just all that without the white behind it. So there's a little white behind it here because of whatever this rolled up to, but it's a little bit on the darker side. So I wanted to do what I could to brighten them up without going in and remaking my veneer. So, white bead core, slice this to get it to release. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a, no, that's not the right blade. That's the heavy blade. Fine blade. Give it a fresh edge here. The outer edges look good. And actually I want to make sure that, yeah, work all the way up to that edge. And I'm going to just kind of try to convince it to start wrapping this. And then as I'm rolling, I'm going to touch and roll back just a hair so I get that line. And then I'm going to try to cut it slightly. Actually, if anything, I want it to angle that way, so it's not going to roll back far enough. Come on, relax. There you go. So I have a little bit of a fold over. So it's cut back at like a 45 away, so I get a little bit of a fold over. Because this has been sitting, it's starting to crack because Cernit is a pita. As much as I love it, it's a royal pain in the butt. But anyway, so start rolling this out just to kind of make sure it's all nice and snug to its little core in there. And just roll it till it gets kind of happy and nice. I don't want it tons longer or stretched from where I started, because I'm going to end up stretching it more. Alright, so now, set my knife down instead of putting it away. This end's got a little bit of a bit sticking out, so we'll check that over into the scraps pile. And then I can do a few different things to decide how long to make these markings, one of which is I can set it on, randomness. Set it on here, use this to be like, okay, I want about 1/4 of an inch piece, and I want to be slightly consistent in my bead sizes. I can do it this way. Lose roundness, that's all right. We're going to keep playing with it. So cut downward, right along those lines roughly, and that would give me a trio of similar sized beads. The other option I have is I've got my little measurement marker doohickey. You can find that on my Etsy shop. And you can just, starts at one edge. So I usually lay that to it. And just give it a slight little roll. Did I do it hard enough? No. Oh, yeah, no, I did. Okay, you can see them there. So you can follow those lines and even use double, or you can use a slightly thinner. Let's see. Those ones are really well laid from here. So let's start from that end. Where'd you go? Okay. It's hard looking down from over the camera. So And like that. And that'll give me those consistent in size relatively. But then I want a couple that are bigger. And I'm thinking double that is going to be too big. So I'm going to go like 1.5. And just eyeball the next one. And then let that be biggest, but it's not quite 2 of those, I don't think. Maybe it is. We'll see. Okay. Put things away. It's amazing how messy my space gets when I'm working without the camera on, because I can. Actually, I'm going to try to adjust this. Sorry, guys. Let's see if I can bring you guys down a little closer so I can see my camera a little easier. There we are. Without having to stand for all this, because most of this is sit-down work. Okay, so these guys got a little off shape. It's not that big of a deal, but it's nice to have them semicircular so I can find the center on the easy side. So I'm just kind of encourage them back to a slightly circular shape. And making sure that I've got a little bit of room to work. I'm going to scoop those all up to the top. And I'm going to start with one. And relatively squared. So I'm going to aim to find about the center. And poke down through. Usually poke about 3/4 of the way through or touching the bottom. So that I think is slightly off center. So I'm going to reset the center on this side, and it usually comes through that same hole. A lot of times it'll have a little scrap there. So having little nubbins to throw my scrap onto is fine. So I'll leave a nubby there. So I have a spot to chuck my scrap. Okay. So now that this is in here, and the hole is now the size of this, I want to make it bigger. So I will just start rolling it. So I'm keeping this steady, and I'm using my nails to or my fingertips or whatever to kind of guide how deep I'm asking this to go. So I want to just get it to the point where my hands have just gotten developed where I have an idea about how far to push so that I get a hole with walls like that. So once we have one like that, I take my little cores, beep, and yes, one of those days. And push it in. I want it to be very close in size if I can, because I want it to just kind of shove in there a little bit. So maybe it'll pick up just a tiny bit of clay as it goes in. If you make it too big and you stick these in, it's a little harder to get them to stay connected to it, where when it kind of dives in a little like that, they tend to stay better. And then I like to roly. Use my hands and just kind of get it slightly bead shaped. And make sure that my outer edges just kind of have a little feel and appeal to them. Man, I love this color tone as it sits. I wish it didn't change so much when it cooks. I have a new batch of Cernet coming in, so provided I don't have to get in a massive battle with conditioning Cernet, I will try to redo the color pattern and see if we can't do a video where you guys can see me getting this look rather than the greener look. Anyway, okay, so then my glass piece moves out of my way. I might, just to kind of make sure everything's working well, sometimes I'll just kind of roll it on my fingers where I'm working on making sure that outer edge is set. Because that's going to be the one thing that I find gets a little tricky, is keeping that outer edge set. Oh yeah, and then for as wide as that is, that looks like that's going to be a pretty good, yep, nice little match for it. And just roly. And sometimes it'll start to get a little fatter than I mean for it to be, so I'll just kind of guide it a little with the right hand and use my left hand or vice versa, and just make sure that it stays pressed down and it doesn't start growing. You know how sometimes, I guess I can show that. Anyway, yeah, so that's done. And then I'll use a glass tile or something to set them on, and they will go in the oven from there. So what happens, just find a chunk of scrap. Actually, it's this idea is what happens as you roll clay. So you can roll clay, and you keep rolling, and you keep rolling, and you keep rolling, and it just spreads and gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, right? But if you roll clay on something, you're not always, it's not going to want to stay with that size. It's going to want to spread out from what you're rolling on the inside. So you can't really, it just wants to expand is kind of its inner thing. So like I said, that's why with the having the cores in them, it helps give me something to say, this is your size, stay put a little bit. But I still have a little bit of expansion, so you still have to kind of watch it for that. So we roll it in, make sure that we've got it nice and tucked. And a lot of times you can even just roll them like this and call it done. I mean, that's still a pretty bead shape, but I like them a little bit more elongated, especially as I often resin them. So if they're too fat to begin with, then they end up really fat. And what keeps popping out here is that's the edge that I left in there when I shove the roller, the ends in, where it connects a little bit. You see there's a little bit of, and once this bakes, that stuff just pops right out of the way. If it's annoying, you can get picky beforehand, but usually once it's baked, it's all right. So yeah, so this is without having the roller helper thing. You can usually just kind of get a pretty good little shape, especially if you're not going for a long bead. Yeah, that one's perfectly acceptable. Another option is you can roll them on glass. And usually I start again, I'm using my fingers tips to kind of, you can try to get it more centered so you get a little bit more balance on your pole. And you just kind of use your fingertips to just get a feel for how deep you want to press it. And that way you're just barely rolling it, but you're keeping it square. And then the other thing you can do, which is really, really, really quirky and difficult, and it's a lot easier at the edge of a table, but you can take your, so I'm using the edge of the glass, and I'm using my thumbs up here to kind of keep this bead from going up too high. And I'm just going to roll a little bit along that edge. And you see how it starts to change the shape of the bead? So then I'll drop it down to the other end and do the same thing here. So I'm just kind of supporting it, and I'm finding the spot where it decides it's willing to roll, and it starts to lay down. But I do find that tends to leave it just a tiny bit pointed in the middle. So I'll give it just a teeniest bit of roll again. Usually that works out, and oh my goodness, we found something we picked up. No, roll away. Okay, we're safe. Go away, garbage. Be gone. All right, so I was going to run it back through, but honestly, that's a nicely shaped bead, so I'm just going to leave that one as is. I'm not going to get picky. All right. So I'll just keep going through these guys and show you what I do. I usually tend to bulk a little bit, so I'll start out by, if I'm doing a good number of these, I'll start out by prepping a bunch in a row and then sticking the cores in them and then running through a bunch in the roller. And it helps me keep more consistent in my sizing and spacing and ideas. That's about right. This big guy. Down as straight as possible. Flip them over. That one's going to be really pretty. Yeah, it's got lots of really pretty details to it. And then roll you out. You can see we get a little longer, a little wider, and that's why I didn't want to over-process my veneer early, trying to make it all super flat and super straight, because I know I'm going to be doing a bit of this. Still don't have a perfect angle on my direction. Well, that might have something to do with having the camera on too. All similar size on both ends, which means I need to keep my finger distance off the glass as even as possible. So like this one's one of those that was a 1.5 marks, so there's a little mark there. There it is. So you'll see it probably will disappear on this point, and it will almost definitely disappear as we go further. Once we start putting it through the bead rack. Oops, sorry. Nope, not quite. It doesn't have to be exactly centered, but you want to be pretty close, because otherwise you'll end up having weight off of different sides and it just comes out a little a little harder to roll and get even. So the more careful you are at this point, the less work you have to put into it later. And so same thing with kind of trying to aim these dead on the middle. And like I said, I like to have just that little bit of catch. The other thing you technically can do is you can probably just poke these in the end without opening the hole up already, but you'll have a lot of inner goo to get rid of when you start sticking a roller in it. So I'm just going to pre-prep a bunch of these. And I do find that this part is pretty important to be aware of because that keeps the little end cap in there. What are these things called? They're rivets, or I think there's another term for them, but I'll make sure I link them in the description below. There's a billion of them, and depending on what size you want these to become, you can order whatever you want. Somewhere floating around, I've got a container from Amazon that has all the different colors and a couple different sizes and whatnot. But I found these ones and I order them a bunch at a time because they're just the right size for what I'm playing with. So for my intention for the beads. So I will link to these ones. Please don't buy them all out on me. The thing I like about these ones, actually, I guess let me cover that. The thing I like about these ones particularly is that they are not a super long shaft. So that's the smallest width I can get it on a bead. So I wouldn't mind if these had a smaller shaft for some other projects, and I might go dig in and see if I can find a smaller overall, but still fits my paracord and a, look, that one already had one on the other side. Smaller shaft and a little smaller hole so that I can make some more accent beads. I've been playing around with that a little bit. I can't remember. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I've got some. I'm thinking I can take something like that, and so it starts out flat, which is the easiest to roll, and then I resined it up. But I did this the cheat version. I'll show you at some point. I'll pull out my roller thingy, or my bead roller made up mechanism, and show you. That one's actually shaped round, so that'll probably come out better when I resin it. And that was just a pretty piece of scrap that, rather than melting it into one color, I figured I'd make a bead out of it. But yeah, so I'm playing with the idea of accent beads, and the other thing I was playing with is this. Trying to cut it with a knife, it's almost impossible to get a straight edge, so I've got a tiny drop saw. So if I make that work, I will show you guys. These are the ones I did with trying to use the knife to cut the edge. So, I mean, it's pretty close, and I think if I put it on a sander where I can have it flat against it, I might be able to just get it to sand up just enough. And that's just got the tiniest hint of a butterfly in it. I thought it was pretty. And that was another one. Just playing with some of my rollers and was checking them out to see how well they'd Mokume Gane. So I usually do a little bit of mica shift just to see if they'll work, and how well they lay down an impression. So I turned that into a bead, and it's kind of cute. But yeah, so that's, these guys are really pretty too. These are little tiny butterflies. Whoop. Yeah, so these started out as really little butterflies, but they stretch a bit when you're working them, especially top and bottom of the bead. So that's, like I was saying, as far as trying to figure out how much you want to work your veneer ahead of actually rolling your bead out, because you need it to have its shape and be in position and, be usable. But at the same time, if you overwork it, then it ends up really stretched by the time it becomes a bead, and then you just have marbling rather than an intentional veneer or a patterned veneer. So, and funny story, this is pretty much what started my obsession with beading and polymer clay in general. Was I have papillons and I show them and I breed them, and I like all the fancy leads, and trying to find someone who sells exactly the right lead for what I want. I got really picky about my leads, so I started learning how to make them in paracord, and then I wanted them pretty, so I wanted to learn how to bead them, and then you can't find all the right colors and matching beads and all the right sizes, and it just got so frustrating. So I'm like, okay, I can make beads. And What am I, like 3 or 4 years later? I finally am good at making beads. It took me a lot of learning all about all the aspects of polymer clay. And the biggest thing is I love these. I love using the Mokume Gane for veneers for beads because it lets me set my patterns and such. But it still has such a earthy and organic feel to it. So, but anyway, so all of this learning how to make the best possible beads ever, better than what I can buy in the real world because nobody sells what I was looking for, which is why I made the leads that I make, is nobody sells them, led me to decide to finally get into the 3D printing game and learn how to actually program my own cutters and my own rollers, and because I wanted certain textures and I wanted the butterflies and I wanted little papillon dogs and all that kind of stuff. So that's what started this whole obsession with the 3D printers. I've actually got one running next to me right now, by the way. That's that little bit of background noise you're hearing. Got some extra large rollers coming out, so I have to keep those going. They take a while, take like half a day. On a big printer, they take an entire day almost. It's crazy. But anyway, so beads became the obsession, which turned into me wanting to learn how to make all the things that I want to be able to do to make the beads. So then I learned how to use the 3D printer thing and started making my own rollers. And then that turned into people wanted the rollers, especially because I make them in a way that is different than what's currently on the market. Got some scraps sitting right here. I make them really deep, and I use a lot of patterning that's a little more organic, and a little visually interesting. But yeah, so what I started doing, people hadn't seen and started asking for, so I started the Etsy shop and started selling them. I don't like to get crafty for income because then there's a pressure to craft, and that for me as an artistic personality kind of starts to make it harder to craft because, yeah, that seems to be the way that goes. But the more pressure there is to create, the less creativity flows naturally. So creativity flowing naturally is what gets me the results I want. And important to that is not putting extreme pressure on myself to create. So I really don't sell anything I make other than the rollers because all I have to do there is create the roller pattern, and then the rest of the rest of it sells itself. So I can run the business part of it, that's fine, but creating to make money just is not something I've never been able to get very good at that. So I like that. I love having an avenue of income that's related to this because it encourages me to keep playing with this and gives me financial incentive to keep crafting and coming up with new ways to do things. But it doesn't take away from, it doesn't overwhelm or overtake my desire to create. So this one's getting a little off balance. I'm going to put just a little finger roll on it for a minute, kind of press it out. So I'm not pushing down too hard against here. I'm more just using that edge to give me the shape. And then we'll go at it again. And now it looks like, so it gets hard to watch them because you see how like the clay being on the ends like that gives you a visual flaw. I don't get in here and clean these off because it just starts, you see what I mean? It's just annoying, and then I'm going to start pushing this out of shape. So I'm looking at the curvature on the edge of the bead, not the ends. I want to make sure the ends are relatively straight, but I don't get obsessive because it's optically disorienting because of the over clay. But rolling it on here, the edges end up cutting through the clay. So once this is finished baking, those will just pop right off. So I just use my thumb and pop off the edges and they clean up no problem. Actually, I might have something. Nope, those are too hot. I will show you later. Make sure my oven's off. But yeah, the ones up there are kind of warm, so I'll show you them in a little bit. Yeah, so and then as far as which section to use, I want the ends to be within the troughs. There you go. You can see how that's starting to slice through, and sometimes it'll leave a bit of clay sitting on here, so I'll just take a nail and roll it off and stick it on some scrap clay over there. Yeah, so these are a little on the nice and deep side, so it gives me a nice rounded bead. And then if they have a more shallow trough like the one over here, this one's more shallow troughs. Sorry. Try to keep everything on screen. This one's got a bit excess of the inner core coming up around the edges of these, so I'm just gonna kind of shove it in there a little bit and make sure that I've got it rolling flat, and those will probably come out the ends once I start rolling it. So this one I want to be nice and wide and not quite so rounded. And just kind of lightly let it shape itself out. I'm not going to put pressure to get it down on its bead roller immediately because I don't want to start misshaping it. So I just kind of let it roll itself until the rod actually lays flat on the roller. There we go. And then I don't think it started misshaping, but a lot of times the bigger ones like to. So I'm just going to do a little finger roll. And one more time like that. And yeah, that one looks really good. Okay. Yeah, I'm liking these smaller ones a little fatter. So I'll keep them fatter. This one's a chunky little guy. So I'm doing this right now to try to roll that down and in and out of the way and clear that up. Oops. Don't want to put you back in. You come out, I will take you out. Whoop. All right. Because that one was fat, I figured it would come wider. There you go. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because this veneer was sitting overnight and that's why it's not just deconnecting from my little ends, or if it just is behaving better today. Oh, the last batch of beads I tried doing. Oh, actually, I'll show you what happened. One of these guys was a mess. That one. So yeah, so this one just went wide on this, so it started coming off the roller. You can even see inside there, kind of just barely. Let me see if you guys can see that. You can see how it's not quite connected to the metal in there either. So basically, the bead started trying to roll loose around the inner core, and that does happen on occasion. So if that happens, just take it off, roll it between your hands again, make sure your little edges are down, and start rolling again. But if you get carried away, especially start going too fast, if it's too much clay where it's sticking to the roller, then the bead really is going to want to release from the ends and free spin. That looks really good. And one more. Ooh. Come on, release. I said, I'm pretty sure that's would likely be the culprit of why it starts to want to stick to this instead of rolling. Make sure you get as much of that out of there as possible. Nice. And then once you start getting clay laying down here, you want to be careful that you stay straight to it. Guys, enough. It's okay. Okay, who's barking? Who was that? I don't even see what that was. You guys can leave it. Thank you. Sorry, they get full of themselves sometimes. So that one doesn't have overly butterfly wing patterning, but man, the patterning's pretty on that. Okay, cool. So this is what we've got so far. So I will go ahead and shove these in the oven, and then I think we can they tend to hold shape surprisingly well, to be honest. I'm always surprised by that. You can kind of knock them around a little bit. They don't tend to move too much once they've sat a minute. They're fresh off the roller, they still are a little soft, but once they dry out. Oh, that's the other thing too, is if you're laying them flat like this, don't let them touch. They will stick to each other, they'll start to, and they'll bake attached, so yeah, don't let them touch. Use a bigger towel if you need. And sometimes I do. Alright, those are still a tiny bit hot, so I'll give them 1 second to cool down. Bake up that batch, and then I'm going to grab that with so I'm not touching hot things. Somewhere else where you can cool down. Alright, so almost cool enough. So these guys just kind of use your thumb and pop pops perfectly clean. So they just pop right off, and the inner core's totally clean in there too. And sometimes I sand these. I have a little belt sander. That's my favorite way to do it. I don't have an easy way to video that for you guys, so we're not going to video it today, but I promise I will put together a video of how I finish these if I want to sand and buff or if I want to resin. I will get all that set up, but I'd rather get a video out to you. I did get the other video uploaded of actually putting together that veneer, so I'm very happy to have gotten that online because my computer was arguing with me like mad about it. Apparently, I have my C drive too full, and it barely had enough processing space to upload the video, so I deleted random stuff. I hope I didn't break my computer last night, but I was getting that video up. Anyway, so yeah, just marbled. So yeah, that's become my newest thing lately is anytime I get pretty scrap, I'm like, oh, beads! And yeah, make a few beads. That's what that blue batch was too, is I was working. Oh, this is going to be a video for you guys too. I was working on this veneer, and I had a whole bunch of leftover scraps after I cut it all out, so that became these. So they don't have any of the detail left really, but it's still a nice little. So same thing, I just kind of build a core and then I wrap the, the scraps around it. A few of them are trying to have little detail, but not really. But it still is pretty enough to be worth finishing out. So I'll probably resin those and get them to really glow. All right, so the other things we was gonna play with is we've got, actually let's get this one out, this one here. We have, our options are, we still have some of that. I can make more beads of that later. I've still got some white floating around. This, okay, so this was a scrap of just that tealiness. Not tealy, sorry, this is the green one. With the tiniest bit of white in there. But I'm going to leave just that littlest bit of white because once I chippy choppy that back up. And then I had a block, there it is, of my impossible to, I mean, look at this, it just totally crumbles and falls apart. So this stuff is amazing when it's like this for doing any version of chippy choppy. It just is perfect. Move this all, sorry. Give me 1 second, guys. All this over here, put that aside because I'm not working on that right now. Just want this. I want a nice firm blade. I like firm blades for chippy chopping. And then I'm just gonna take a bit of this off. Probably, nah, you know what? Screw it. We'll use the whole thing because it's a lot darker than I wanted it to be. So rather than trying to get in there and run this all together, I figured we could just chippy choppy up some fresh Cernet. And then chippy choppy this up. Chop, chop. Watching that Willy Wonka, the new Willy Wonka movie the other night. Scrub, scrub. Chop, chop. Sorry. Let's see. Looks like I've got a little bit more Cernet than I really want. Ooh, but I could colorize that and add something to it. You know what? Just put it all together. So if I add mica powder, I'll have to add something to bind it. If I keep it kind of loose like this, I might be able to just crunch it together. Maybe. I'm trying to make sure it stays a little balanced, so that's why I'm not opposed to doing it by hand. Like that, starting to get a little too much of it right there, so spin you around and stick you back together. So yeah, you see what I mean about the crumbly? This would not condition pretty. I would be fighting with it for hours trying to get that to behave, so not worth the fight. I ordered a couple new blocks. They should be here in a few days, and if they come in, then we will try to make that color, because you guys, a bunch of you have been asking on the groups, in the Mokume Gane group and whatnot, about what colors I used, so for the first set. So we'll try to recreate that. Alrighty. Oh yeah, that's really pretty. brown powder. Probably going to make it worse by doing that, because if it is the mica powder coming from within, so the brown, yeah, I think it was the brown one that was so over pigmented. Alright. Okie dokie, acrylic block. Alright. Usually call that extra scrap. Actually, since we're going to just roll it up onto. So, still think we're probably going to want a white center core for that. I'm going to vote we do that again, because I think it'll work better that way. Let's take one of these that has a nice bit of coloring to it. I'm going to roll it out real quick. Alright, yeah, it's got a nice bit of spread to it, and it's going to fall apart if I'm not careful. Yep. And let's just wrap it up. Yeah, I can go over twice, it doesn't matter. Hands off. You guys are a little irrelevant. Yeah, that's pretty. That should end up really nice. Throwing things. Alright, so I'm going to want this to kind of blend together a little better. So I'm just going to kind of pull the clay around a little. Push a little, pull a little, and roll you back up. Push you back down, roll you back up. Alright. Yes. Okay, sorry. Not enough color up here, so I'm going to make that go away. And then I'm going to cut you in about half. That's going to be a little trickier to decide where the center is, because my colors are off now, because that's doubled up because it had more in it. So you kind of have to try to eyeball it a little more plainly. I'm excited to see what these turn out like. So I'm not sure how many times you guys want to watch me rolling these out, but that's going to be the same thing. I will finish these up and throw them in the oven and show you, but I had one more thing I wanted to play with, and I was going to show you guys how to wrap the veneer on another color. So let's see. I've got, those are the teals that were the original color set. You know what might be really pretty? Ooh. Let's try it over gold. Let's see how that turns out. This is probably gold mixed with translucent. I usually keep a 50-50 floating around until I run out of good translucent, and then I stop doing it. Actually, I'll use, this is probably Sculpey Primo translucent. It's the Cernit stuff that's a pain in the butt. Primo can be difficult, but it's not usually nearly as difficult as, I might want... So this had just kind of a little bit of a mess to it, like parts of it, you know how when you make a shift you get weird color patterning and stuff. So rather than taking the time and making the noise to correct that, I'm just going to spin it so now it's visual interest instead of trouble. And, oh, that was just a hole. But yeah, so now we have a little patterning. Oh, no, that's scrap. That we don't want. Yeah, I know. Not being as clean and careful as I could be. Okay, so now I have this guy. And let's pick... We want some of the green to go over it. I have a feeling that would be really, really pretty. Just lay that on. Up and over the edge a little bit. And try to make sure that all of that lays down as it goes. And I don't really want that to overlap and cover it over itself. So I'm going to set that down in case we need something else. And then we need another section. Actually, what was that? Not enough detail. Eeny, miny, scrappy mo. This guy, my thumb's really thin. If you're having trouble picking up scraps off the plate, I a lot of times will take a knife and slide that under to get them to move where I want them to go. And that's translucent, so that's not going to be a problem if that covers over that, because that should still show through. Yeah, it should be interesting to see how this comes out. And I should have used a knife on that. I lost a little of it. So I'm going to go up to the top right there because I lost part of that. And one thing I do want to do is I want to try to make sure that all the gold is covered with translucent. And a piece about that wood. And like I said, I don't mind if some of the green is double covered with translucent because that'll help to tone it down just a touch. And there you walk up there. Technically, you're still usable, like right there. And then I would like a small piece of something. Go there, fill that spot. So a little something to go there. Oh, don't move. Stay put. Stay where I put you. Oh, you didn't stay exactly where I put you. Hold on. And that might be a little bland. Stay put. Go where I tell you. Okie dokie. So again, the thing I love about Mokume Gane is the organic appeal. Nothing has to be perfectionistic, and honestly looks the best when it's a little crazy. Just go down. What was I trying? Oh, I'm trying to fill there. Let's see. That scrap is awfully thin. Should look down there. Just to give us a little color and a little texture to it. And the green up here. Okay. No, stay. Stay where you're put. Alright, so scraps go away. Alright, so there's enough room on this towel to work. So I don't have to overwork it at this point, but I just want to make sure that that's all laying down and in. So there we go. So again, just gonna run through and finish these guys out. I think that was all I was gonna do. Probably end up chippy chopping up this with the dark green and the white mixed in it, and maybe throw a little more of the bad translucent in it if I can find it. And actually, oh, there's some bad translucent. Yeah, stick you in there too. Okay, yeah, I'll probably chippy choppy that all up, and I will be back once I've got some finished and cooked beads and show you how everything turned out. I'll be back. Okie dokie. we are back and they are out of the oven, and OMG, they're gorgeous. Okay, so this was the main veneer over a white interior. And I do like how it just kind of lightened up and brightened them up a little bit. So they're not quite so intense green. They've got a nice brightness to them. These guys here were just the leftover scraps and the chippy choppy. And that goes all the way through with no off-colored core. So that's why those have the most intense pigment. These ones here, oh, and on this end, those were the scraps. So I mentioned it when I was building the veneer, if you watched that video. So this is the shavings all in a pile. That's how those came out rolled. And apparently a piece of blue made it in there. So I might try to sand them down and get that out of there, because it's a little jarring compared to the rest of them. But yeah, those two came out really pretty too. This is just scrap that was sitting next to me that's marble-esque, so I figured I'd throw them into beads. These ones are neat though. This I decided to try an aqua blue instead of white inside. And outside was that short piece of scrap veneer. Yeah, short piece of scrap veneer. So it was what was left over from what we made the other day. And I like that because rather than giving it a white, it gives it a dusty blue effect through. So it kind of teals them up a little bit. But I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of difference. It's just the slightest little bit of difference. But I like it. Let's get you guys all sitting in place. And then these are what was when I grabbed what was left of the scrap and a chunk of translucent that had nothing done to it and just chippy choppied it all together. So there's a teensy bit of white that was in there because it was, I think one piece still had a little bit of a little bit of the butterfly slicing on it, but otherwise it was just all translucent. So as far as just a basic scrap bead, I like those a lot. They're very pretty. And then I did go ahead and put a white core in them. So I put that over white core. And then this was where it was over, this was our little extra scrap pieces that I put over the gold center. And OMG, I think that's the winner this time around. I really like that with a bit of green hint on it. So Mokume Gane, always keep the scraps if you can. And then this must be that other, this must be this chippy choppy over gold, because I had a bunch of it. So I went ahead, and this I think is my favorite of them, because you see that just a little bit of a shimmer of gold. I bet when I resin these, I bet these will like glow, because come on, you can do it. Come on, there you go. Because gold tends to have a lot of pop to it, so it'll probably be a different video, but I'll save these for doing a video showing you guys how I finish them off, because I think it'll be an interesting, there's a tiny bit of metallic and all that mica powder too, so I don't know. I'm thinking these resin will be kind of amazing. Who's being grumpy? You babies are being grumpy today. But yeah, so that's, there's just a couple more of those guys sitting around. They didn't fit on the stick. Yeah, that seemed to be the most of the veneer that I had was this and those. But yeah, so I think I am rather... Oh, and these are, as we were talking about how short you can make them, I think these are about as short as they would go. I'm pretty sure the interiors, they all line up. So I was just playing around to see how small I could make them so that they'll work as accent beads on, say, something like this. So I could do them like that with a bit of a spacer in between, something metallic in between to space them out, and they'll make a really pretty accent piece for that. So yeah. Anyway, that's what I was playing with, so I think I'll call it a wrap there, and I will try to get this video up shortly, and then I will work on how I finish off these beads, most notably the process of resining and whatnot. Oh, and these are another thing I am planning on throwing in the Etsy shop at some point. Oh my god, this is gonna make such a mess. Um, I need to gain access to one of my printers that's printing everything else and swap it out to the heat safe resin. They won't be colored; they'll probably be gray because I don't think I can colorize the heat safe stuff. But then they will be oven safe. So I plan on making these available in the Etsy shop soon. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully that'll happen soon. Anyway, you guys have a great day.